ghost of the mountains. Snow leopard, somewhere right now, on a frozen cliff face in Central Asia, roughly 18,000 feet above sea level. A cat is doing something that should be physically impossible. She is sprinting downhill across nearly vertical rock, chasing a wild sheep that outweighs her by more than 3 times, and she is gaining. Her massive tail, almost as long as her entire body, whips behind her like a furry rudder, adjusting her balance with every stride. Her oversized paws, padded with thick fur on the underside, grip the icy stone like Velcro. And then she leaps. Not a little hop, not a cautious pounce, but a full-bodied launch across a gap in the rock that would make a human mountaineer clip into a safety harness and reconsider their life choices. She covers nearly 50 feet in a single bound, and when she lands, the sheep is already beneath her. This is not a lion charging across a sunlit savanna. This is not a tiger prowling through a humid jungle. This is hunting at the edge of the atmosphere, in a landscape so hostile that most living things simply gave up and moved somewhere warmer a few million years ago. But not this cat. This cat looked at the highest, coldest, most punishing mountains on the planet and said, "I'll take it." The snow leopard is, by almost every measure, one of the most extraordinary predators that has ever lived. And here is the fact that should stop you in your tracks. Of all the large cats on Earth, the snow leopard, this apex killer of the high Himalayas, has never once been verified to have attacked a human being. Not once. There is not a single confirmed case in recorded history of a snow leopard attacking a person. A lion will charge you. A tiger has been known to stalk villages. Even a mountain lion in the American West will occasionally consider a jogger as a viable option. But the snow leopard, an animal perfectly equipped to bring down prey 3 times its own weight on the side of a cliff, appears to have absolutely zero interest in humans. If you stumble upon one feeding on a kill, it is far more likely to simply abandon its meal and disappear into the rocks like smoke than to stand its ground. It is, perhaps, the most powerful creature on the planet that wants nothing to do with us. And that combination of lethality and restraint, of raw physical dominance paired with an almost monk-like avoidance of conflict, is part of what makes this animal so endlessly fascinating. They call it the ghost of the mountains, and honestly, that nickname barely does it justice. This is an animal so elusive, so supernaturally adapted to its environment, that scientists spent decades studying its habitat without ever laying eyes on one. Entire research expeditions have gone into snow leopard territory and come back with nothing but paw prints and the faint, lingering suspicion that they were being watched the entire time. The legendary field biologist George Schaller, who has spent more time in remote wilderness than most people spend indoors, described one of his rare snow leopard sightings in the mountains of Pakistan in the 1970s. Wisps of cloud swirled around the animal. He later wrote, transforming her into a ghost creature, part myth and part reality. That description has stuck because it captures something essential about this cat. The snow leopard exists at the boundary between the real and the unreal, between animal and apparition. It lives in places humans can barely survive, let alone explore. It moves through terrain that looks like the surface of another planet, and for most of human history, it was more legend than fact, a spectral presence haunting the high passes of the world's greatest mountain ranges. But here is the thing about ghosts. They tend to fade, and the snow leopard, for all its power and mystique, is fading. The global population is estimated somewhere between 4,000 and 6,500 individuals, stretched thin across roughly 2 million square kilometers of the most rugged terrain on the planet. That sounds like a lot of space until you realize that more than 70% of it has never been properly surveyed. We do not actually know how many snow leopards are out there. We do not know exactly where they all are and the pressures bearing down on them, from poaching to climate change to the slow encroachment of human activity into their mountain strongholds, are intensifying. This is a story about one of nature's most perfect creations, an animal that has spent millions of years perfecting the art of living where nothing else can. It is also a story about what happens when the world around that animal begins to change faster than evolution can keep up. So settle in. Let the darkness wrap around you, and let me take you to the roof of the world, where the air is thin, the wind cuts like a blade, and a gray shadow moves silently across the snow. The leopard that is not a leopard. Let us start with a bit of an identity crisis, because the snow leopard has one. Despite its common name, the snow leopard is not actually a close relative of the leopard. Not even close. If you were to draw the family tree of the big cats, the leopard, the one with the golden coat and black rosettes that prowls the forests and savannas of Africa and Asia, would be sitting on a branch alongside lions and jaguars. The snow leopard, on the other hand, would be perched on an entirely different limb, right next to the tiger. That is right. The snow leopard's closest living relative is the Bengal tiger, the largest cat on the planet. They are sister species, sharing a common ancestor that diverged from the rest of the big cat lineage, roughly 3.9 million years ago. The tiger then began to evolve into its own distinct species around 3.2 million years ago, heading toward the dense tropical forests of Southeast Asia, while the snow leopard's ancestors took a radically different path, climbing higher and higher into the frozen mountains of Central Asia, eventually becoming the cold weather specialist we know today. The scientific name tells part of the story. Panthera uncea. Panthera places it firmly in the genus of the big cats, alongside the lion, tiger, jaguar, and yes, the common leopard. But the species name uncea has an unexpected origin. It derives from the Old French word once, which was itself a mangled version of the word lynx. Centuries ago, European naturalists, working from second-hand descriptions and the occasional imported pelt, confused the snow leopard with the Eurasian lynx. The word once was originally elance, French for the lynx. But over time, the L was mistakenly separated from the noun, and once became the name for this entirely different cat. It is a small linguistic accident that ended up permanently embedded in the animal's scientific classification. The English word ounce an old name for the snow leopard still occasionally used today, comes from the same root. For a long time, taxonomists were not even sure the snow leopard belonged in Panthera at all. It was placed in its own separate genus, Uncia, because it was so physically different from its supposed relatives. Its skull is shorter and more compact. Its eye sockets are more rounded and forward-facing. Its body is stockier, its legs are shorter, and its tail is absurdly, almost comically long. And then there was the voice. Every other member of Panthera, the lion, the tiger, the jaguar, the leopard, can roar. The snow leopard cannot. It was the odd one out, the big cat that did not quite fit the mold. But when genetic analysis finally caught up in the early 2000s, the DNA was unambiguous. The snow leopard was a Panthera through and through, and its closest relative was the tiger. The physical differences, the shorter skull, the different body proportions, and the inability to roar were not signs of distant relation. They were signs of radical adaptation. The snow leopard had simply been reshaped over millions of years by one of the most demanding environments on Earth. An adult snow leopard typically weighs between 60 and 120 pounds, making it one of the smaller members of the big cat family. Males are roughly 30% larger than females, but beyond size, the two sexes are remarkably difficult to tell apart. From head to rump, an adult measures roughly 3.5 to 4.75 feet. But the tail is the showstopper. It can add another 36 to 40 inches, meaning the tail alone is often nearly as long as the entire body. No other cat on Earth has a tail-to-body ratio anywhere close to this. It is thick, densely furred, and serves multiple critical functions that we will get into shortly. The coat is a pale, smoky gray, shading to creamy white on the belly, with dark rosettes and spots scattered across the body, and solid black markings on the head and lower legs. In winter, the fur grows especially long and dense, reaching up to 5 inches in some places. The overall effect is breathtaking. Against a backdrop of gray rock and snow, the snow leopard is essentially invisible, a living piece of the mountain itself. Deep time, where the ghost came from. To understand the snow leopard, you have to understand the world that built it. And that story begins not thousands, but millions of years ago, on the Tibetan plateau, in a landscape that was already ancient when the first humans were still swinging from trees. In 2013, a team of paleontologists led by Jack Tseng made a discovery that rewrote the early history of big cats high in the Zanda Basin of western Tibet, in sediments that required a grueling 7-day drive from Beijing to reach. They unearthed a crushed but largely complete skull buried beneath a pile of antelope limbs and ancient jawbones, deposited by a river that had been eroding the cliff face for eons. After 3 years of painstaking analysis, combining anatomical study with DNA comparison, they identified it as a new species, Panthera blithyi. And this animal, roughly the size of a modern clouded leopard, turned out to be the oldest big cat fossil ever discovered, dated between 4 and nearly 6 million years old. That pushed the known origin of the Panthera lineage back by roughly 2 million years, and the skulls features bore a striking resemblance to the modern snow leopard. A broad forehead, a short face, and teeth with wear patterns suggesting a diet and lifestyle remarkably similar to today's ghost of the mountains. The implications were profound. Before this discovery, the oldest known big cat fossils had come from Africa, leading many scientists to assume that the Panthera lineage originated on that continent. But Panthera blithyi was found in the heart of Central Asia, in a region that overlaps directly with the current range of the snow leopard. The fossil evidence now strongly suggests that big cats evolved in Central Asia and spread outward, not the other way around. The Tibetan Plateau, it turns out, was not just the snow leopard's current home. It may have been the ancestral cradle of all big cats. And here is what makes that even more interesting. The Zanda Basin, 6 million years ago, was already cold. The Tibetan Plateau had been rising for tens of millions of years, and by the time Panthera blithyi was prowling its rocky slopes, the climate there was harsh, dry, and brutally windy, much like it is today. But the rest of the world had not yet entered the Ice Age. Tibet was, in a sense, a preview of what was coming. A cold laboratory where animals could develop adaptations for freezing environments before those conditions spread across the globe. Tseng and his colleagues proposed that the Tibetan Plateau served as an evolutionary training ground, not just for snow leopards and their ancestors, but for a whole suite of cold-adapted megafauna: the woolly rhinos, the cold-weather antelopes, the Ice Age horses. Many of them may have gotten their start in the same high-altitude crucible before spreading out during the glacial periods that followed. The ancient predator-prey relationship between Tibetan big cats and the wild sheep and antelopes found alongside them in the fossil record has roots stretching back millions of years. Blue sheep and Tibetan antelopes were already living in the Zanda Basin when Panthera blithyi was hunting there. The same ecological dynamic that plays out today: a stealthy cat pursuing sure-footed wild sheep across steep, rocky terrain, was already well established before the Pleistocene ice ages even began. The snow leopard and its prey did not just stumble into their current arrangement. They have been locked in this evolutionary arms race for longer than the human species has existed. After Panthera blithyi, the fossil record becomes sparse but telling. A major international study published in Science Advances identified rare snow leopard fossils from across the Eurasian continent, including sites in China, France, and Portugal. These European specimens, some dating to the Middle Pleistocene around 500,000 years ago, suggest that snow leopards, or their close relatives, once ranged far beyond their current Central Asian stronghold, spreading westward during cold glacial periods when the climate and terrain of parts of Europe briefly resembled the conditions these cats were built for. But these outposts were temporary. As the climate warmed between ice ages, those European populations died out or retreated, and the snow leopard consolidated its range back on the Tibetan Plateau and surrounding mountain systems. The research team found that the snow leopard's adaptations to steep, mountainous terrain became dramatically more pronounced during the Middle Pleistocene, roughly 800,000 years ago. This was the period of the early Middle Pleistocene transition, when glacial cycles became longer and more intense, and the environmental pressures on mountain-dwelling species ratcheted up significantly. The skull became shorter and more compact, improving stereo vision for spotting camouflaged prey in open, rocky landscapes. The limb proportions shifted, with shorter front legs and more powerful hind legs optimized for launching up steep inclines and making massive leaps across crevasses. The ear bones enlarge, enhancing hearing in the open, wind-blasted environment, where sound behaves very differently than it does in a forest. Every generation, the snow leopard became a little more perfectly tuned to its impossible environment. The genetic story tells us something else entirely, and something a little unsettling. A landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in late 2025, led by researchers at Stanford University, sequenced the genomes of more than 40 snow leopards, the most comprehensive genetic survey of the species ever conducted. What they found was that snow leopards have the lowest genetic diversity of any large cat on Earth, even lower than cheetahs, which are famous for their genetic bottleneck. But the cause was different. Cheetahs lost their diversity rapidly through a sudden population crash. Snow leopards, on the other hand, appear to have always been a small population. Their low genetic variation is not the result of a recent catastrophe. It is the product of millions of years of living in small, fragmented groups across vast, inhospitable terrain. They have never been numerous. They have always been rare. The surprising silver lining is that snow leopards have evolved a kind of genetic resilience in the face of their own scarcity. The Stanford team found that the species has an unusually low homozygous load, meaning that harmful genetic mutations have been periodically purged from the population over evolutionary time. When a bad gene surfaced, the individuals carrying it tended to die before reproducing, or their offspring were less successful. This natural purging, facilitated by occasional inbreeding in small populations, essentially cleaned the gene pool, allowing the species to remain relatively healthy even at very small numbers. But there is a hard limit to how much this trick can protect them. In a rapidly changing environment, low genetic diversity means low adaptability, and the environment is changing. Built for the impossible, the body of a mountain ghost. If you were to design a cat from scratch, intended to survive and hunt in the most extreme alpine environment on Earth, you would end up with something very close to a snow leopard. Every feature of this animal's body reads like an engineering solution to a specific problem posed by life above 10,000 feet. Start with the fur. A snow leopard's coat is not just thick, it is an insulation system that would make a cold weather clothing company weep with envy. The outer layer is long, soft, and pale gray, covered in dark rosettes and spots that break up the animal's outline against rocky terrain. Beneath that is a dense, woolly undercoat that traps warm air close to the body. In winter, this fur can grow up to 5 inches long, creating a thermal barrier that allows the cat to rest comfortably on snow and ice when the temperature plummets far below zero. The color palette, that cool gray shading to white, is not just beautiful. It is functional camouflage of the highest order. Against the granite, shale, and snow of their mountain habitat, snow leopards are almost supernaturally difficult to see. Seasoned researchers have looked directly at a resting snow leopard from 100 yards away and failed to distinguish it from the rock. The internet is full of find the snow leopard photos, and most of them are genuinely impossible to solve without someone pointing out the cat. Now look at the paws. A snow leopard's feet are enormous relative to its body, significantly wider than those of any other big cat. They function as natural snowshoes, distributing the animal's weight across a larger surface area so it can walk across deep snow without sinking in. The undersides of the paws are covered in thick, coarse fur that serves double duty. It provides insulation against the frozen ground and dramatically improves grip on steep, icy surfaces. Imagine trying to climb a wet, nearly vertical rock face in your socks. Now, imagine someone handed you a pair of boots with built-in crampons and sheepskin lining. That is what a snow leopard's paw is doing for it every single day. The legs tell their own story. Snow leopards have notably short front limbs relative to their powerful hind legs. This asymmetry is not a flaw. It is a launching system. Those muscular hind legs allow the snow leopard to leap vertically up to 20 feet and horizontally as far as 50 feet in a single bound, which is essential when your hunting strategy involves ambushing prey on near vertical mountain slopes and then chasing it across broken rock. The short front legs, paired with sturdy shoulders, absorb the impact of those massive jumps and provide the leverage needed to wrestle prey that can weigh 3 times as much as the cat itself. It is a body built not for the flat sprint of a cheetah or the brute wrestling match of a tiger, but for the 3-dimensional world of cliff faces, ledges, and ravines. And then there is that tail. We mentioned it before, but the snow leopard's tail deserves its own moment. At up to 40 inches long, it is proportionally the longest tail of any cat species. It is also extraordinarily thick, packed with fat stores, and covered in a dense layer of fur. The tail serves at least 3 critical functions. First, balance. When a snow leopard is running full speed across a steep, rocky slope, chasing prey that is itself a master of mountain terrain, the tail acts as a counterweight and rudder, making micro-adjustments that keep the cat from tumbling into oblivion. Second, insulation. When the cat rests, it wraps that massive tail around its body and over its face, creating a furry barrier against the wind and cold. Mothers use their tails to cover their cubs in the den, keeping the newborns warm in an environment where losing body heat can be fatal. And third, and this is the part that has charmed the entire internet, snow leopards hold their tails in their mouths. It is an endearing behavior most commonly observed in captive animals, though the general mechanics of tail wrapping for warmth certainly apply in the wild as well. The leading theory is straightforward. In extreme cold, the nose and mouth are the most exposed parts of the face, lacking the thick fur that covers the rest of the body. By gripping the tail and pulling it across the face, the cat creates a furry mask that insulates those vulnerable areas. Some researchers also believe it may be a comfort behavior, similar to a human baby sucking its thumb, a self-soothing mechanism that reduces stress. Whatever the reason, the sight of a snow leopard with its enormous, fluffy tail stuffed in its mouth is one of the most delightful images in the natural world. The head holds its own suite of adaptations. The skull is notably shorter and more compact than those of other big cats, with a pronounced forehead and forward-facing eye sockets that provide exceptional binocular vision. This is not accidental. In the open, rocky landscape of the high mountains, prey animals like blue sheep and ibex have evolved protective coloration that makes them extremely difficult to spot against the rock. The snow leopard's enhanced depth perception and wide field of view allow it to detect these camouflaged animals from great distances. Then precisely calculate the angles and distances needed for an ambush across three-dimensional terrain. Their eyesight is estimated to be roughly 6 times more acute than that of an average human. The ears are small and rounded, set close to the head. This is a cold weather adaptation. Large, protruding ears would act as heat radiators, bleeding precious warmth into the frigid mountain air. By keeping its ears compact, the snow leopard minimizes heat loss. They can also flatten their ears against their skull, reducing their profile even further when stalking prey through low cover. Then there is the nose. The snow leopard's nasal cavity is unusually large relative to its skull, and this is one of the most critical adaptations for high-altitude life. At elevations above 15,000 feet, the air is not just cold, it is thin. Every breath contains significantly less oxygen than at sea level, and the air itself is bitterly dry. The snow leopard's enlarged nasal passages serve as a warming and humidifying system. Cold, dry air enters the wide nostrils and passes through a large internal chamber lined with blood-rich tissues. By the time that air reaches the lungs, it has been warmed to body temperature and moistened sufficiently to prevent damage to the delicate lung tissue. Without this adaptation, every breath at extreme altitude would be a small assault on the respiratory system. The snow leopard breathes the same brutal air as a human mountaineer at Everest Base Camp. But unlike the mountaineer, it does not need supplemental oxygen, acclimatization periods, or expensive Gore-Tex face masks. It has been solving this problem for millions of years. The chest is broad and muscular, housing powerful lungs that can extract oxygen efficiently from thin air. Combined with the nasal warming system, this allows the snow leopard to sprint, leap, and wrestle prey at altitudes where most mammals would be gasping after a short walk. It is worth pausing to appreciate just how extreme this is. The snow leopard hunts at elevations where human climbers experience altitude sickness, cerebral edema, and pulmonary failure, and it does it while chasing animals across vertical rock at speeds that would leave a professional athlete doubled over in the parking lot. Kingdom of ice and stone. The snow leopard's domain is one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. Its range spans 12 countries across Central and South Asia. Afghanistan, Bhutan, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. That is an enormous geographical spread, covering roughly 2 million square kilometers of mountain terrain. But do not let the size fool you. This is not a continuous, unbroken kingdom. It is a patchwork of isolated mountain ranges, separated by valleys, deserts, and increasingly, human settlements. The snow leopard's habitat is, by its very nature, fragmented. Mountains are islands in the sky, and the cats living on them are, in many cases, separated from other populations by terrain they cannot or will not cross. China holds the lion's share, so to speak. Roughly 60% of the snow leopard's total range falls within Chinese borders, spanning the remote provinces of Xinjiang, Tibet, Qinghai, Sichuan, and Gansu. The estimated Chinese population ranges from around 2,000 to as many as 4,500 individuals, making it by far the most important country for the species' survival. Mongolia comes next, with roughly 1,000 snow leopards inhabiting the Altai and South Gobi mountain ranges. India's population, concentrated in the Himalayan states of Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh, was estimated in 2024 at approximately 718 individuals, a number that has been growing in some regions thanks to dedicated conservation efforts. Nepal hosts an estimated 300 to 400. Bhutan has seen a heartening 39.5% population increase since 2016, and the remaining range countries each hold smaller but ecologically significant populations. The typical snow leopard habitat is alpine and subalpine terrain, ranging from about 9,800 feet to 14,800 feet in elevation, though the cats have been recorded as high as 18,000 feet in summer and as low as about 6,000 feet in the northern parts of their range during winter. They prefer broken, rocky terrain with cliffs, ridges, and ravines that provide both vantage points for spotting prey and cover for ambush hunting. Open meadows, dense forests, and flat valleys are generally avoided. The snow leopard is a creature of edges and vertical surfaces, living in the kind of terrain that most animals would consider impassable. Home ranges vary enormously depending on prey density and terrain. In Nepal, where prey is relatively abundant and the mountains are steep and compact, a single snow leopard may occupy a home range of just 12 to 39 square kilometers. In the vast, open landscapes of Mongolia, where prey is scattered across enormous distances, home ranges can balloon to 500 square kilometers or more. A recent GPS telemetry study of snow leopards in Nepal's Kangchenjunga Conservation Area found that home ranges were 6 to 97 times larger than previously estimated, with one individual recorded at the highest elevation ever documented for the species, 19,186 feet above sea level. That study also found that the cats frequently crossed international borders, with 3 of the 4 tracked individuals moving between Nepal, China, and India, spending 10 to 34% of their time in other countries. Snow leopards, it turns out, do not recognize human political boundaries. Their mountains cross borders, and so do they. Within their territories, snow leopards follow predictable routes along ridgelines, through narrow valleys, and across the rocky saddles between peaks. They mark these routes obsessively, scraping the ground with their hind feet, spraying urine on rocks, rubbing their heads against prominent boulders, and raking their claws along tree trunks and stone surfaces. These scent marks serve as a complex communication network, broadcasting information about the marking cat's sex, reproductive status, and identity to any snow leopard that passes by. It is a social media platform written in biochemistry, and it allows these solitary animals to maintain awareness of one another across vast distances without ever meeting face to face. The only times snow leopards regularly come together are during the mating season and when a mother is raising cubs. Otherwise, they maintain a courteous distance, ghosting through each other's lives as literal ghosts, present only as a lingering scent on a cold rock. The silent hunter. The snow leopard is an ambush predator of the highest order. Its hunting strategy is not built on speed, endurance, or brute force, but on patience, stealth, and the lethal application of gravity. The primary prey species are large mountain ungulates, blue sheep, also called beryl, in the Himalayas and Tibetan Plateau, Siberian ibex across much of Central Asia, and argali, the largest wild sheep species on Earth, in Mongolia and the Pamir Mountains. These three species form the backbone of the snow leopard's diet, and the availability of these wild prey animals is the single most important factor in determining whether a given area of mountain terrain can support a snow leopard population. An adult snow leopard requires the equivalent of roughly 20 to 30 blue sheep per year. That means a single cat needs a minimum population of 100 to 150 hoofed animals living within its home range, just to sustain itself. The hunt typically begins from an elevated position. Snow leopards use ridgelines and rocky outcrops as observation posts, scanning the slopes below for the telltale movement of a blue sheep herd or a solitary ibex picking its way across a scree field. Their enhanced binocular vision and forward-facing eyes allow them to detect prey at impressive distances, even when the target animal is nearly invisible against the rock. Once prey is spotted, the snow leopard begins a slow, methodical stalk, using every fold in the terrain, every shadow and boulder, to close the distance without being detected. This approach can take minutes or hours. The cat moves when the prey's head is down, grazing. It freezes, pressed flat against the rock, when the head comes up. It uses its cryptic coloration to melt into the mountainside, inching closer with the patience of a monk and the focus of a surgeon. The kill strike is launched from above. Research from Mongolia's Tost Mountains, where GPS-collared snow leopards have been studied in unprecedented detail, has revealed that roughly 62% of successful ibex and argali kills occur in drainages, the narrow gullies at the bottom of steep slopes. The pattern that emerges is elegant and brutal. The snow leopard ambushes from an elevated position, often from behind a rock or the lip of a ridge. The startled prey does what every mountain ungulate is programmed to do. It runs downhill, using gravity and momentum to build speed. But the snow leopard anticipated this. It gives chase, using its own body, that powerful hind leg asymmetry, and that extraordinary tail to maintain control on the steep descent. The prey builds speed as it races toward the bottom of the drainage. But when it reaches the flat ground at the base of the gully, its momentum stalls. It has to decelerate, and that is the moment the snow leopard closes the final distance and brings it down. The kill itself is typically a combination of a flying tackle and a precise bite to the throat or the back of the neck. Snow leopards have long canine teeth and powerful jaws, but they are not built for the crushing bite of a jaguar or the suffocating clamp of a lion. Instead, they rely on a sustained throat hold that restricts blood flow and collapses the trachea, a technique that requires less raw power but demands precision and persistence. The cat pins the prey with its forelegs and massive claws while maintaining the bite, waiting for the animal to weaken and stop struggling. Against an animal that can weigh 350 pounds or more, this is no small feat for a cat that may weigh less than 100. It is one of the most extreme predator-to-prey weight ratios of any big cat hunt. After a successful kill, the snow leopard feeds slowly. Unlike a lion, which gorges quickly in the company of its pride, or a cheetah, which eats fast before a larger predator can steal the meal, the snow leopard takes its time. It typically remains near the carcass for 3 to 4 days, eating every few hours and guarding the kill from scavengers like vultures and ravens. A single large kill can sustain a snow leopard for up to 2 weeks. On average, a solitary snow leopard takes down a large prey animal roughly every 8 to 10 days. Though females with cubs hunt more frequently to meet the increased caloric demands of a growing family. Snow leopards are also opportunistic feeders. When large ungulates are scarce, they will hunt smaller mammals such as marmots, pikas, and hares. They will take game birds like snowcock and chukar partridge. In Mongolia's Gobi region, some snow leopards have been documented hunting goitered gazelles. And in a detail that surprises many people, snow leopards also eat vegetation. Scientists have found grass, twigs, and other plant material in snow leopard scat. And while the exact reason is not fully understood, it may provide supplemental vitamins, aid in digestion, or help the cats expel internal parasites. It is a reminder that even the most refined predator is, at the end of the day, a pragmatist. The overlap between snow leopard habitat and domestic livestock, primarily sheep, goats, yaks, and horses, creates one of the most significant sources of conflict between this cat and the humans who share its mountains. Snow leopards prefer wild prey, but when those populations decline due to overgrazing by livestock or illegal hunting by local communities, the cats are sometimes forced to kill domestic animals to survive. This is where the relationship between humans and snow leopards gets complicated and often tragic. A single snow leopard entering a poorly secured livestock corral can kill multiple animals in a single night, not out of malice, but because the confined space triggers a predatory instinct that does not have an off switch. For a herding family living at the margin of subsistence, the loss of several sheep or a valuable yak calf can be financially devastating. And the response often is to kill the cat. Retaliatory killing of snow leopards by herders who have lost livestock is estimated to account for more than half of all snow leopard deaths at human hands. It is not poaching for profit, it is desperation, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult to address. The voice that cannot roar here is one of the strangest paradoxes in the animal kingdom. The snow leopard belongs to Panthera, the genus defined by its members' ability to roar. Lions roar, tigers roar, jaguars roar, leopards roar. But the snow leopard, a card-carrying member of this exclusive vocal club, cannot produce a roar, not even a small one. The reason lies in the anatomy of the throat. In the 4 roaring species of Panthera, the hyoid bone, a small U-shaped structure that supports the tongue and larynx, is only partially ossified. It remains flexible, connected by an elastic ligament that allows the vocal folds to be stretched wide, producing those deep, resonant, earth-shaking vocalizations that can travel for miles across open terrain. The snow leopard also has a partially ossified hyoid, which is why it was classified in Panthera in the first place. But its vocal folds are only about 9 millimeters long, far too short to provide the resistance to airflow needed to produce a true roar. The machinery is there, at least partially, but the fine-tuning is different. The result is an animal that falls into a peculiar acoustic no man's land. It cannot roar like its Panthera relatives, but it also cannot produce the continuous, bidirectional purr of smaller cats who have fully ossified hyoid bones that enable that particular vibration pattern. Some researchers have noted that snow leopards can produce a kind of exhale-only purring sound, but it is debated whether this qualifies as true purring in the technical sense. What the snow leopard can do vocally is surprisingly diverse. It produces mews, much like a house cat, particularly between mothers and cubs. It growls and hisses when threatened or during territorial disputes. It moans in low, rumbling tones, and during mating season, the females emit a loud, piercing wailing call, a yowl, that carries across the mountain valleys and is designed to attract males from the neighboring territories. The Buffalo Zoo shared footage of one of their snow leopards, a male named Altai, producing this yowl, and it is an eerie, haunting sound. Nothing like a roar, but undeniably powerful in its own way. And then there is the chuff, also called a prustin. This is a non-aggressive puffing sound made by pushing air through the nose and lips. It is quiet, close range, and used exclusively as a greeting or sign of non-hostility. Tigers make it too, which is a nice nod to the sister species relationship. When a mother snow leopard approaches her cubs, she chuffs. When 2 cats encounter each other in a non-confrontational context, they chuff. It is, essentially, the snow leopard version of a friendly wave, a vocalization that says, "I come in peace, and I am not going to eat you." In a world where the snow leopard's solitary lifestyle means face-to-face encounters are rare and potentially dangerous, having a quick, unmistakable signal for "we're good" is a genuine survival tool. The inability to roar has led some scientists to argue that the snow leopard should be reclassified out of Panthera entirely, back into its own genus. But the DNA does not lie. Genetically, it is a Panthera, closer to the tiger than the leopard is to the lion. The silence is not a sign of evolutionary distance. It is a sign of evolutionary specialization. The snow leopard does not need to roar. It does not defend a territory by broadcasting its presence across miles of savanna. It does not need to intimidate rival males with a wall of sound. It lives alone in vast ranges where encounters with other snow leopards are infrequent and managed through scent rather than sound. The mountains are quiet, and the snow leopard is quiet with them. It is, perhaps, the most eloquently silent predator on Earth. Love in the high passes. The mating season for snow leopards falls in the dead of winter, between January and mid-March, when the high mountains are at their coldest and most forbidding. For an animal that spends most of its life in deliberate solitude, the urge to mate triggers a dramatic, if temporary, change in behavior. Males begin expanding their home ranges, covering more ground in search of receptive females. Both sexes ramp up their scent marking, spraying urine, and leaving scrapes along travel routes with increased frequency and intensity. The chemical signals embedded in these marks contain detailed information about reproductive status, and when a male detects that a nearby female is in estrus, the chase begins. Finding each other in this vast, broken landscape is itself a remarkable feat. Female home ranges typically straddle the borders of 2 or more male territories, giving them a choice of potential mates. When a pair finally meets, the male stays with the female for roughly a week, sometimes less, sometimes slightly more. GPS tracking data from Mongolia's Tost Mountains documented one mating pair that remained within 10 meters of each other for 4 solid days in early March. During this period, they moved together, rested together, and mated multiple times. Researchers following their GPS signals found tracks in the snow showing 2 cats walking side by side for extended distances, a sight that, in the context of the snow leopard's usual solitary existence, borders on romantic. After mating, the male returns to his solitary rounds. He plays no known role in raising the cubs. The entire burden of pregnancy, birth, and nearly 2 years of parenting falls on the female alone. The gestation period lasts roughly 93 to 110 days. As her due date approaches, the pregnant female begins searching for a suitable den site, typically a sheltered cave or a deep crevice in the rocks, well hidden from predators and insulated from the elements. She may line the den with fur pulled from her own body, creating a warm nest for the vulnerable newborns. Cubs are born between April and June, with a peak in June and July. A typical litter consists of 2 to 3 cubs, though litters of 1 or as many as 4 have been documented. At birth, snow leopard cubs are small, blind, and completely helpless. They weigh between 11 and 20 ounces, roughly the weight of a can of soup. and are covered in a thick coat of dark fur that is noticeably darker than their mother's coat. Their eyes remain sealed shut for about 7 days. They cannot walk for several weeks. For the first 2 to 3 months of life, the cubs remain inside the den while the mother ventures out to hunt, returning frequently to nurse them. This is the most dangerous period for the cubs. They are vulnerable to predation by other carnivores, exposure to the elements, and starvation if the mother is unsuccessful in her hunts. At around 2 months, the cubs begin eating solid food, likely their first taste of ibex or blue sheep brought back by their mother. By 3 months, they are strong enough to follow her out of the den and begin the long education that will eventually prepare them for independent life in the mountains. This learning period is extensive. The cubs observe their mother's stalking techniques, her choice of terrain, and her patience. They play fight with each other, developing the coordination and muscle control they will need as hunters. They practice pouncing on rocks, chasing shadows, and ambushing their mother's tail, which, in the context of snow leopard behavior, may actually be one of the functions of that tail-biting behavior we discussed earlier. For cubs, the tail is a training tool. What is remarkable and somewhat unusual among big cats is how long snow leopard cubs remain dependent on their mothers. In most large cat species, cubs reach independence at an age roughly proportional to their body size. A leopard cub, which reaches a similar adult weight, typically separates from its mother at around 18 months. But snow leopard cubs stay with their mothers until they are 20 to 22 months old, making them outliers among solitary cats. The reason likely lies in the extraordinary difficulty of their environment. Learning to hunt in the snow, leopards' three-dimensional world of cliff faces, ice fields, and vertical ambushes takes more time and practice than learning to hunt on flatter terrain. A premature departure could be fatal. The separation process, when it finally comes, appears to be triggered by the mother entering estrus again. GPS data from collared cats in Mongolia showed that when the territorial male began visiting the mother during the next mating season, the cubs began making exploratory movements away from her, separating for a few days at a time before reuniting. Female cubs tended to linger in or near their mother's territory for several months after the initial separation, while male cubs dispersed more quickly, moving out of the natal range within a month or so. Dispersing young snow leopards have been documented crossing 20 to 65 kilometers of open steppe and desert to reach isolated mountain massifs. A perilous journey for an animal adapted to rocky terrain. Female snow leopards appear to reach reproductive maturity by age 3 or 4. Males are likely sexually mature by age 2 or 3, but do not have the size or experience to defend a territory and access females until around age 4, because females must invest nearly 2 full years in each litter. They typically breed only every other year. This slow reproductive rate, combined with the high demands of cub rearing in such a hostile environment, means that snow leopard populations grow slowly and recover slowly from any disturbance. It is a reproductive strategy built for stability, not resilience. It works beautifully when the world stays constant. It is terribly vulnerable when the world starts to change. Shadows and threats, the human toll, for an animal that has spent millions of years perfecting the art of invisibility. The snow leopard's greatest threat comes from the one species it cannot hide from. Humans have been killing snow leopards for centuries, but the scale, methods, and motivations of that killing have shifted dramatically in the modern era, and not for the better. The most immediately devastating threat is retaliatory killing, as human settlements and livestock grazing expand further into snow leopard habitat. The frequency of livestock depredation increases, and the response from herding communities is often lethal. Estimates suggest that more than 50% of all snow leopard deaths at human hands are the result of retaliatory killings by farmers and herders who have lost livestock. Another roughly 20% are killed incidentally, caught in snares and traps set for wolves, foxes, or other animals. These are not organized crime. They are the desperate acts of people trying to protect their livelihoods in some of the most remote and economically marginalized communities on the planet. But the killing does not stop there. Roughly 20% of snow leopard deaths are attributable to targeted poaching for the illegal wildlife trade. Snow leopard pelts, bones, claws, and teeth all have commercial value. The skins have long been prized as decorative rugs and taxidermy displays. And in recent years, demand for snow leopard products as luxury home decor has increased in China and Eastern Europe. The bones are used as a substitute for tiger bones in traditional Chinese medicine. And DNA testing has confirmed the presence of snow leopard genetic material in commercial traditional medicine products seized by authorities. A report by Traffic, the Global Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network, estimated that between 221 and 450 snow leopards may have been poached annually since 2008. That is potentially as many as one per day. And those are only the cases that come to light. Wildlife crime has extremely low detection rates, and the true number may be significantly higher. The trade routes are well documented in China, which holds the majority of the snow leopard's range and is also the primary consumer market. Investigators have identified 4 major trafficking corridors. Snow leopard skins move from Central Asia through Xinjiang, from the Qinghai Tibet region to Sichuan and Gansu, from southwest China to the eastern seaboard, and from Mongolia and Russia through Inner Mongolia. The border regions are porous, with traffickers sometimes simply wearing the furs across checkpoints. The major trading hub has historically been the city of Kashgar in Xinjiang, though enforcement has increased in recent years. Between 2003 and 2016, at least 710 snow leopard skins were documented in trade, of which 288 were confiscated by authorities. In China alone, an estimated 103 to 236 snow leopards are poached every year. The legal protections are extensive, at least on paper. The snow leopard is listed in Appendix 1 of CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which prohibits all international commercial trade in the species and its parts. It is legally protected in virtually every country. In India, hunting a snow leopard is punishable by 3 to 7 years in prison. In Nepal, the penalty is 5 to 15 years. In China, it carries at least 10 years and the confiscation of property. But enforcement is the problem. The snow leopard's habitat is, by definition, remote, inaccessible, and vast. The communities that live there are often isolated from central government authority, and the economic incentives for poaching remain powerful. A single snow leopard skin can sell for hundreds of dollars in local markets, a sum that represents months of income for a mountain herding family. The 2013 Global Snow Leopard Forum, held in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, brought together government leaders from all 12 range countries, along with conservation organizations, international agencies, and scientific institutions in a landmark effort to coordinate snow leopard protection across borders. The resulting commitment was to secure 20 large snow leopard landscapes by 2020, ensuring enough connected habitat to sustain viable populations. Progress has been real but uneven. Some countries, like Bhutan and India, have made significant gains. Others, particularly those dealing with conflict, political instability, or severe economic challenges, have struggled to translate commitments into action on the ground. A warming world. If poaching and human conflict represent the immediate threats to snow leopard survival, climate change is the slow-motion catastrophe gathering force on the horizon. And for an animal so precisely adapted to a narrow band of high-altitude habitat, the consequences could be devastating. The Himalayas and the broader Central Asian mountain systems that form the snow leopard's domain are warming at roughly double the global average rate. Since the mid-1970s, the Himalayan region has warmed at a rate of approximately 0.06 to 0.08 degrees Celsius per year. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects that average temperatures in the region could rise by 3 degrees Celsius by the 2050s, and as much as 5 degrees by the 2080s. These numbers sound modest in isolation. They are not. The most direct impact is on the tree line. As temperatures rise, the tree line in the Himalayas is creeping upward. Trees are colonizing areas that were previously too cold to support them. And the alpine zone, that open, rocky, above treeline habitat where the snow leopard lives and hunts, is shrinking. A widely cited study estimates that up to 30% of snow leopard habitat in the Himalayas could be lost to a rising tree line under high-emission scenarios. As forests climb upward, they bring with them the common leopard, a competitor that can hunt in forested terrain far more effectively than the snow leopard. The potential for increased competition between the two species, which have historically been separated by the tree line, is a growing concern. Glacier retreat is another compounding factor. Glaciers across Central Asia are melting at rates significantly above the global average, reducing freshwater availability for both snow leopards and their prey. As water sources become more localized and seasonal, prey animals may shift their ranges, forcing snow leopards to expand their home ranges or descend to lower elevations, where they encounter more livestock, more humans, and more risk of conflict. The melting of glaciers and permafrost also destabilizes steep mountain terrain, increasing landslide risk and altering the physical landscape that snow leopards depend on for hunting cover. The prey animals themselves are being displaced. Blue sheep and Himalayan tahr, pushed by changing vegetation and altered grazing conditions, are moving to higher and higher elevations where food is scarcer, and habitat patches are smaller and more isolated. This creates an ecological mismatch. The predator and prey, locked in a relationship that dates back millions of years to the time of Panthera blithyi, are being pulled apart by shifting conditions that neither evolved to handle. In some areas, declining prey density has already forced snow leopards to travel farther between kills, expending more energy and reducing their hunting success rate. The genetic vulnerability identified by the Stanford study adds another layer of concern. With the lowest genetic diversity of any large cat species, snow leopards have very little adaptive capacity in reserve. They cannot rapidly evolve new traits to cope with a warming world. They cannot shift their physiological tolerances overnight. They are a species that has been finely tuned over millions of years for a very specific set of environmental conditions, and those conditions are changing faster than at any point in the evolutionary history of the species. It is not all darkness, however. The same study found that 3 large patches of snow leopard habitat in the Altai, the Kilian, and the Tian Shan Pamir Hindu Kush Karakoram mountain ranges have remained climatically suitable from the last glacial maximum through to the present day, and are projected to remain suitable through the end of this century, even under relatively aggressive warming scenarios. These areas account for about 35% of the snow leopard's current range and are large enough to support viable populations. They represent potential refugia, safe harbors where the species can persist through the worst of the coming changes. But protecting these refugia will require active, coordinated conservation efforts across multiple countries in regions that are not always politically stable or economically robust. Conservation organizations are adapting their strategies. The World Wildlife Fund works with local communities across snow leopard range countries to install predator-proof livestock corrals, establish insurance and compensation programs for livestock losses, and develop alternative livelihood opportunities that reduce dependence on grazing. Community-based conservation has proven effective in changing attitudes toward snow leopards, reducing retaliatory killings, and creating economic incentives for protecting the cats rather than killing them. In Bhutan, these efforts contributed to that remarkable 39.5% population increase. In Kyrgyzstan, a former hunting concession in the Shamshi region has been converted into a wildlife sanctuary, and ibex populations have rebounded sufficiently to draw snow leopards back into the area. New technologies are transforming research. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, allows scientists to detect the presence of snow leopards in an area by collecting and analyzing water or soil samples without ever needing to see or disturb the animal. GPS collaring has revealed far more about snow leopard movements, home ranges, and habitat use than decades of previous research combined. Camera traps capture thousands of images each year, and artificial intelligence is being used to identify individual snow leopards by their unique spot patterns. The Stanford team has developed a genetic test that can be applied to fecal samples, allowing researchers to learn about the genetics, diet, health, and identity of a wild snow leopard from a single piece of scat found on a mountain trail. The snow leopard exists at the intersection of so many of the challenges that define our era: climate change, biodiversity loss, human-wildlife conflict, the tension between economic development and environmental preservation, the difficulty of coordinating conservation across political borders in regions marked by poverty, conflict, and rapid change. This one animal, this gray ghost of the high mountains, embodies them all, but the snow leopard has been here before. Not here exactly, not in this specific configuration of threats, but in a general sense, the snow leopard has survived ice ages and warming periods, glacial advances and retreats, the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. Its ancestors watched woolly rhinos come and go. They outlasted the scimitar cats and the cave lions. They have been living on the edge of the possible for millions of years, in a landscape that has always been harsh, always been unforgiving, always been trying to kill them. The question is whether this time is different, whether the speed and scale of the changes now bearing down on the snow leopard's world are too fast, too comprehensive, too relentless for an animal with such limited genetic flexibility and such a slow reproductive rate to absorb. The answer is not yet written. It depends, in very large part, on what we do next. Somewhere tonight, on a frozen ridge in the Himalayas, a snow leopard is settling down to rest. She wraps her massive tail around her body, pulling the thick fur over her nose and mouth, and closes her eyes against the wind. She has been doing this, or some version of her has been doing this, for millions of years. The mountain is unchanged. The stars are the same. The cold is eternal. And somewhere, in a research station in Mongolia, a graduate student is downloading the latest batch of GPS coordinates from a collared female they have been tracking for 3 years. The data shows she has a new cub. Somewhere in a village in Nepal, a herder is checking the reinforced door on a predator-proof corral that was installed last year by a conservation team. His goats are safe inside, somewhere in a laboratory at Stanford. A biologist is running a new genetic analysis on a fecal sample collected from a trail in Ladakh, extracting secrets from the DNA of an animal that no human has ever seen. The snow leopard does not know any of this. It does not know about the research papers, the conservation programs, the international agreements, the camera traps, the eDNA protocols, the activists, the donors, the scientists staying up late poring over data. It knows only the mountain, the cold, the hunt, the long silence of the high passes. But we know, and knowing is the first step toward action. The ghost of the mountains has haunted these peaks since before humans walked upright. whether it continues to haunt them. A living shadow on a living mountain depends on whether the world below decides this ghost is worth fighting for. Whether she will still be there tomorrow and 1,000 tomorrows after that is the only question that matters.